one of the things I've found in doing this is that there are plenty of women newsmakers out there, plenty of women in finance and business, which is what we cover, at Bloomberg. That people would say, well, it's mostly male, and you're just going to find token women. But that hasn't been the case. We've broken stories as a result of quoting these women who other people had just not found. It's harder. You have to go out and look for them and not rely on the same people all the time. But when you do that, you realize that some of the people you've been relying on all the time just show up, or they just take your call because they always get called. And so I guess what I'm going to ask the panelists now is, what kinds of things, what hurdles do we face, and what kinds of things are your news organizations doing to try to both increase the number of women in positions in newsrooms and those who we quote and showcase as newsmakers? So Agnes, I'm start.
For me, the hurdle is, I think it's because I'm a video journalist, I have to carry a lot of equipment. And it's very simple, but most people think I can't because I'm not really big, I don't have massive muscles. So often I go on the field and people are like, can you carry this? Can I help you with your tripod? And sometimes they're just trying to be nice, but it's really patronizing. Or sometimes I set up my camera and you have 10 guys who are looking at me and they expect me not to know how to operate my camera. So they want, they want to help. So they're like, oh yeah, this is a cable. I'm like, yeah, I know, and it's terrible because everyone is trying to be nice and they're not. They mean well, I think, but it shows that for women to operate a big camera, a big tripod, sometimes I interview someone and then, he'll be like, do you need help? Do you know how to set up the microphone, right? And, it is annoying after 10 years being out there on the field, working. They always, I often get also, where's your boss? Because they think I'm the intern carrying all the kit before the interview will start. So I think it's getting better though, because also the cameras are getting smaller, the tripods are getting lighter. So I think newsrooms are also investing money in equipment that makes it easier for people. I think that 10 years ago, maybe I would not, 20 years ago, maybe I would not have chosen to be a video journalist because I would feel this is not for me. I can't do it because society makes you believe you can't do it, right? So maybe when it comes to choose whether you want to be a radio journalist, a print journalist, a video journalist, a lot of women just self-censor themselves and are like, well, I can't do that, it's too heavy. So I think that technology is on our side. Now people shoot with smartphones, things get smaller, people get used to seeing, well, not in India, but in other countries, people get used to seeing video journalists on the field. So I think it's pretty encouraging, and I've seen people's mentality change over the year as well. So that's pretty good.
Great, some good news from technology. And Emery, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I think just from the outset, I think the whole mindset needs to change. I think maybe a lot of more women don't aspire to senior positions, and they need to be encouraged to. For me, I've been bureau chief at Reuters in Hong Kong for about 3 years. I think I was first offered the position maybe 8 years ago, and the thought of it absolutely terrified me. So I wouldn't take it. And I was very lucky. Someone was saying earlier about sponsors and mentors. A sponsor is great, but even, more important is you don't understand who your sponsors are. I realized that I had, some very, supportive, fabulous sponsors who were kind of, they had mapped out what they wanted for me, and they were really trying to coax me into this position. And I ended up being standing in as bureau chief for Reuters for quite a long period of time. And I was still thinking that they were just waiting to hire someone, but they were just kind of waiting for me to just settle in that role until I was happy. And then they said, well, listen, you've been doing it. Just take it. And I was like, oh gosh, okay. And I did. I think the mindset, I think women need to aspire more. I think a lot of women need to, they need to aspire to bigger things, to better things, and understand who their sponsors are. If you're out there, having sponsors, one of my best people who hired me actually in Singapore was a woman called Anne Senior. And when I got the job in Singapore, about a week later, I realized I was pregnant. And I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Do I tell her? Don't I tell her? What will I do? Anyway, I called her up and I said, Anne, I'm pregnant. And I just, I presumed that was going to be it. Oh, no. This was 17 years ago. And she was like, well, that's fine. In Singapore, the men do military service for 8 weeks. Maternity leave is 8 weeks, so it's fine. So, she was a fabulous mentor and supporter for me. And yeah, she was just incredible, and actually, again, coaxed me into places I would never have gone. And yeah, I have a lot to be thankful for her. Yeah.
I just want to touch a little bit on what Agnes said about equipment and it being heavy. I was really happy. So yesterday I was out on a shoot, and for the first half of the shoot, we couldn't have a producer with us. So it was just me and our photojournalist. And he is comfortable enough with his masculinity to email me and say, hey, actually, I need help with the kit. Could you meet me at the bureau so you could help me carry some of the kit to the car? Yes, I can. I have somewhat spaghetti arms, but I can absolutely help you lift whatever you need to lift. And it was really nice that he was willing to just email that and say it out loud. And he's one of our younger photojournalists, so I think things are changing, and I agree with you there. In terms of what I think women really need to do a little bit more is ask for more money. This is a personal thing of mine. I'm new to business journalism, but a lot of the people that you end up talking to in the field, well, one, you realize that there are a lot of jobs out there that pay a lot more than journalism. Surprise. But we should not be shy about demanding what we are worth. It's very difficult also too because, especially in Western culture, in Asian culture, people are really happy talking about what you make. My parents' friends, my cousins, everybody asks you what you make. Oh, you're doing this job now. Okay, so what are you making a year now? Oh, Uncle Kevin. But when you work for an international organization that's a Western organization too, it can be a little bit more uncomfortable. And sometimes it's in your contract that you're not supposed to be talking about it. There is a great group in CNN, I'm not a part of it, but there's a great group of CNN producers who share their salaries amongst each other, a trusted group of female producers who know that they can share their salaries with their colleagues and their friends, trust that they are not going to use that information in a negative way, but rather use it in a way that gives them a little bit of bargaining and leverage when they go into a negotiation with HR or with senior editors or directors and so on and so forth. And what I always try to advise younger female journalists coming up in this industry is, look, all they can say is no. And all you can do is demand what you are worth. Because what you are asking for in a salary early on in your career, it has ripple effects for decades and years to come. So if you're not asking for what you're worth in the beginning, you will be worth less, just from a numerical standpoint, you will be worth less 5 years, 10 years down the line, especially if you stay at the same company.
Serena?
Yeah, so in terms of, I guess, barriers in Asia, or barriers for female journalists in Asia. So being an Asian journalist who worked in the US for a long time, I can talk a bit about the barriers facing Asians in outside of Asia. I mean, for many years as a journalist, when I was quite a much younger reporter, I definitely there were times where I would be mistaken for another young Asian reporter, such as Ling Ling Wei, who's now, as you know, also back in Asia. But people will say, oh, hi, Ling Ling. And I'll be like, I'm not Ling Ling. And it actually happened a lot of times. I hate to say it, but it's quite a common thing. And someone will say, well, because, you Asians are all about the same height, all about the same age. But you know what? And I would see that when I was interviewing people too. Like I once interviewed the Moody's CEO, and he was like showing me around the company. He said, you're so young to be in your job. Just can't believe how young you are. And I was like, geez, at that point, I think I was in my early 30s, but like now I'm in my 40s, but you can tell I probably look a bit younger than I am. And I always had this issue where people just wouldn't take me very seriously because I look young and I'm petite. I know there was a question about this in the last panel, so I thought it would be good to address that. I always felt like, my work speaks for itself. People may not take me seriously, but, I would always be professional about it. I would be like, I would be very polite back to them, but would not ever kind of like say, go, shove it somewhere. But I always felt like, at the end of the day, the work we do is very transparent. You know, if you're a writer, reporter, you write with a byline. They see your work. If it's high quality, they will get sooner or later that, you know, you're credible and you're good. I definitely had a bit of that. And definitely about the issue with pay, I also feel like women are afraid to ask for more. And I did get some advice from male colleagues about how they do it. I think that's kind of good too. I'll be like, how do you negotiate for pay? And they'll be like, you need to think like a man. Like a man would not be like, oh, you know, I've been working so hard and not recognizing it. You have to be like, I've done this, and compare yourself with someone else. I mean, do your own research, like among your peers, like how much are they getting, what are they producing, and be like, and have a basis of it, you know, and kind of take the emotion out of the thing. I feel like women, when they want something, they tend to be, they overthink it, and you know, and they can't take out the, oh my God, I worked so late, so many days, and no one appreciates it. I don't think men think like that. I hate to say it, but very few men will be like, you don't appreciate me because I worked so hard. They're just going to be like, you know, this is what I produced, compare it with my peers, and I think based on this, I haven't gotten a raise for 3 years, I feel like I deserve a raise, you know. So I think there are these things culturally, also like gender-wise, that women tend to, you know, be less good at, you know, in terms of negotiating for themselves, and, you know, we definitely want to try and correct that. So, you know, I sometimes, when people come to me, obviously not my own reports, but other people in the organization ask me for advice, I do tell them, like, you know, look at your peers, who would you compare yourselves to? You need to have a basis of comparison to try and get a better deal for yourself.
In terms of what organizations are doing, I think there definitely needs to be something that you put in place to actively push people, to push women to the front and to the top, because there is inertia and people think use the past as a reference. And I think 3 things that Bloomberg is doing right now that really helps me and also all my female colleagues is, one is that, first of all, we do have to, there is an effort to have more female voices in our stories, and we have a bulletin board and we collect all the female voices that we think that are useful, and so these are references that we look at. We have metrics to see how many female voices we have in our stories across the board. A second thing is we have an active mentor-menteeship program. I'm personally looking after a mentee and talking with this person on a month-by-month basis. And one of the things that we do discuss pretty often is the issue of salary. Just the whole notion of how do you even bring that conversation up with your editors. And you know, I wish that somebody told me this earlier. It took many years till some more senior female reporter told me, men just don't think like how you would think. They would go and ask for something even if they're only 60% prepared for that job, whereas women always think, am I 90, 100% suitable for this job? Do I have all the qualifications? So sometimes you just need to go ask, and the worst thing is, first of all, they don't give you that job, but they'll know that you are asking or you want that position. And the second thing is that, you know, they'll know that they have to appreciate your work in the future, or so the worst is that you don't get it, but at least it puts you on the map. The third thing I think is really interesting is Bloomberg, I think we started giving men paternity leave, a longer extension of paternity leave. That in a sense I think is bringing equality to the next level, because you know, it's not just about the moms taking care of the babies. The men have to do their share of the work as well. So giving men more time to take care of babies is awesome.
Well, my next question is about the business case for this. It's great that we all talk about how important this is and how, you know, change is to come. But why should our organizations do this? And what have we found when more women are promoted and are, you know, helping run organizations? And I'll answer it a little bit for us at Bloomberg, and for instance, in Women's Voices. By doing this, we have actually you brand yourself in a different way. You're a place that people want to come. When you go out and recruit people and you try to recruit women, if you are saying, well, you should come work for us, you know, we have, you know, our values are diversity and inclusion, and you can't prove it, it doesn't help. But if you can say, we actually have programs in place to do this, that really does help you in terms of bringing people in and being able to show it, that you actually are quoting more people, that women are newsmakers. It also helps you, if this really is your value, then you need to walk the walk. So I guess that's the question, how have your news organizations, and what are the cases you would make to your news organizations that this shouldn't just be tokenism, that we should really have women at all various levels in our news organizations?
Well, I think it should not be black and white, as in men versus women. In my case, it's only men who sent me to all these places I mentioned, war zones, typhoons, disasters. It's always been a man who trusted me and decided to send me out there. So I think that we should not be, women against the rest of the world. There are definitely men out there, including my boss who's here, that's why I'm saying that, who are also eager to have more, a bigger female presence in the newsroom. I think that when you go to journalism classes now, you see a lot of women. When I look at the audience here, I see a lot of women. So I think there's definitely a wide pool of talents out there. And I think that male news editors or female news editors are eager to pick the best person and the best candidate. And then less and less, they will be like, ooh, Ukraine, I'm going to send the big guy next to you. Although back in my day, there was no guy in the newsroom for video, so that was great because it was just females, like petite Asian girls, most of them. So I was one of them, and I had to be sent because there was no one else, maybe. I don't know, but so I think that definitely now in video, I see a lot of female journalists. So I'm based in India. My colleague in Pakistan is also a woman. We have a lot of female journalists in difficult countries. My friend is just going to start a new job in Iraq as a video coordinator for AFP as well. So our company is not shying away from picking women, and I think this is very, very encouraging.
Yeah. I mean, I think at Reuters we have this Women in Leadership program. And it's been promoted fantastically across the world. I was lucky enough to be chosen a year ago to go on that. And it's basically an off-site program. We were taken to New York. And it was women from across Thomson Reuters. So there was two journalists, myself and this woman from the UK. And it was women from across all of the units at Reuters. And it was absolutely fantastic. It was, the investment they put into it. There was probably about 35, 40 women. Jim Smith, the top guy, he invested like a half a day. He came, spoke to us, asked us what needed to change at Reuters, what we needed to do. We had, senior members of the board coming to us, asking us, advice on what more they could do, how Reuters could change to get more women at the top. And the investment, it was just incredible. It was really, I was skeptical at first, to be honest, I have to say. I shouldn't say that, but I was. But it was great. And these programs, I think they just show from the outset that companies are committed and will invest. And when I came back to Asia after that program, just, speaking to people in the bureau and that, and just telling them, the commitment is coming directly from the top. They are, this is a top priority. And we should embrace it. Also, our regional head for Asia, our former regional head, Jean Yoon, she was a woman, in charge of Asia for Reuters. I think we've come a hell of, I've been, in journalism for 24 years, basically. And I think things have changed, and I would say immensely over the past maybe 5 or 6 years.
I want to echo what Lulu and Agnes said, which is this is not, men have a huge role to play in this as well. And so thank you, first of all, to all the men who are at this panel, because you have a big role that you can play. For me personally, I came to, this will sound a little bit like name dropping, Jake Tapper brought me with him to CNN. I was his producer at ABC. I was so scared to work for him because he's a very demanding journalist. But once you kind of get over that, he really respects you when you're trying to get him to track his piece because you need to make air. And when he brought me to CNN, one, it showed that there was somebody who believes in you, who's also willing to champion you. And he also came to CNN with a very specific show in mind that he wanted to create, and it's become this wonderful show now. And from the get-go, from day one, he said, I do not want any political panels where it is all white men. This coming from a white man who is also still rising in his industry. And he set the tone at CNN and at our show that everybody has sort of taken a lesson from and followed. He brought in Neera Tanden, and he brought in other wonderful women and voices, and also men of color who were not being represented on air. So I do think that men have a huge role to play in that. And the other thing that I want to talk about is a little bit about, we talked about this in the pre-panel call, which is the Me Too movement. I really hope, I've had lots of discussions with fellow female journalists and male journalists about this too. For all the male journalists out there, and certainly of a certain generation, please do not let the Me Too movement deter you or scare you from taking on young female journalists as mentees. You hear a lot of like, well, I don't know, I just don't want to get into that because, what if I get in trouble, or what if I get accused of doing? Well, no. Don't do some of the things that you read about Harvey Weinstein or other people doing, and you will be fine. Because as we are changing and the industry is changing, it's definitely moving in the right direction. At the end of the day, most of the people in higher positions are still men. You can do a lot to help the growth of young female journalists in this industry and to encourage them to stick with it.
Great.
Okay, so at the Journal, we also have some like senior leadership programs for women. I think, but there definitely has been questions from the people who are lower down the hierarchy about like, so what about us? What about the younger or more junior people, or people who are like the first 3 to 5 years of the career, or people who are in mid-level positions? So in Hong Kong, we recently started like a monthly meetup of the women in the newsroom, and it's kind of more of a feedback sharing session, what can be done, what else, suggestions on what we could do more to be, like for people to be noticed by the people in New York. It's also more organic mentoring that I think, probably needs to be done more. Like, when I was thinking of having kids, like, I looked at, I talked to a few editors or even colleagues about how do you manage, to have a career while having children. And now that I have 2 boys who are like 3 and 5, and I was telling Cherise, like, actually I have to go home at lunchtime because they were crying this morning. They're like, why do you have to go to work today on this Saturday? They were pretty upset about me having to go to work. I mean, it's a real struggle, but I think like being a mom of young kids and trying to juggle a career like makes you kind of a lot more, first it makes you more efficient because you're like, if you only have like 8 hours a day or 7 hours a day away from the kids, you're going to do more, which is actually good for companies. I think companies should hire more moms because they really know that they have to manage their time. But I also find myself reaching out to people like, and just, people come ask me, so when did you tell your boss that you were pregnant? And was it an issue? And, and I know like at least the female managers in the Journal, like one reporter came in like 2 or 3 years ago and she started work when she was 6 months pregnant. And I was really impressed by the person who hired her. I was like, you know what? She was visibly pregnant during her job interview. They knew she was going to come in and go on maternity leave in 3 months. But we have to look at the long game, right? Someone goes away for 3 to 6 months, but they come back, and I think like people who go away and have kids can come back are just so much more determined to show that they can do this and to juggle their work and career. And I think like you should get a better worker in the end because they know like that while I was away for 6 months, now I have to come in and really kind of like kill it, So I do think that there's the more formal programs that go on, but I think most women in leadership actually have a big responsibility to try and reach out to people or kind of work with women to help move them, help them to achieve their goals and basically help them to do what they want to do and be clear about messages and things like that.
That's a really good point that we all have to be involved in mentoring and sponsoring both, especially women who have kind of made it in their careers, but also men, and that it would be a shame if one of the unintended consequences of the Me Too movement is for there to be a lack of mentoring by men who still, are in positions in which they can have a very positive effect on young women's careers. Lulu? Anything to add?
Yeah, so I think for now, most newsrooms don't have, there isn't a lack of female journalists, but there is a lack of having female journalists stay in the newsroom long enough, or having enough mothers move up, women who become mothers and then still stay in the profession and move up the totem pole. And then the second issue that I think could be addressed better is that, so last year, 2 years ago, I started teaching at Baptist University, and what fascinated me was the students that are coming in. First of all, most of them are from mainland China. Second of all, last year my entire class was all girls, 26 girls. Partly the reason for this, they tell me, is because their families aren't expecting that much of them to make money, so they can do this, whereas the boys get a lot of burden. They have to, be manly and make money and make big bucks, so they go into finance and other stuff. And then the interesting thing that what is happening right now in most newsrooms in China right now is you'll see a lot of researchers in the field, and most of them are women. They're doing all the hard work. They're doing the shoe leather reporting. And then, first of all, this is an issue that was brought up in the previous panel, not enough credit given to them. And then the other issue is, okay, it's one thing to not get bylines because there's policies, but in terms of equal pay, that is something I think that most newsrooms can work on. But the moment that these people hit that moment where they have to think about family, think about financial burden, that's the moment when a lot of really good, great talented reporters, female reporters, leave this industry. And it's something that I think we can actually make a change in. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a real challenge. Is you get people in the door, and how do you keep them there? And I think the point Serena made about making sure that you're giving people chances to come back and still be in important roles is really important. Well, we have time for a few questions. If you ask a question, if you could please identify yourself and your organization, that would be great. So right here in the front. Yeah, right here.
I'm Zoe Ransom. I'm just a high school student.
You have a great microphone.
Hi. So yeah, I'm a high school student, and so thanks to all of you for sharing. This is really interesting, especially in our position as students aspiring to different jobs, looking at different industries. And my question is, I'm just thinking about the anecdote that Cherise shared about that young coworker asking for help with carrying all the stuff for the shoot. We've talked about how all of you guys have moved towards different positions in the industry, and I'm just wondering, how do you think mentalities are changing in younger male counterparts? Because the message that we as college or high school students get is actually quite confusing, I feel, because they're telling us that we're going to have, as women, we're going to have to work hard, to fight for our position, and at the same time, lots of people are telling us that it's, things have changed a lot and that everything's fine, actually. And we're quite confused, I feel. So I just wanted to know what you think.
Join the club. This has been, my generation got this, the next generation got this, that we were going to change the world. And if we only worked hard enough, that things had changed. And we're still dealing with these same issues in 2018. But I'm really glad you asked that question. Who wants to take a shot at answering it?
I'll take a shot. So I've been in the television news industry for 8 years now. And even in those 8 years, in the first place I started was ABC News. Most of the senior editorial positions at ABC News were dominated by men, and of a certain generation, so white men with white hair, mostly. And in just the 8 years that I've been in the industry, I am now at a top international network where I'm very proud to say at our bureau, our senior vice president is Elena Lee. Our director of coverage, our last two directors of coverage were both women. The last one was a woman, a female minority, and another one is coming here, and she is coming here from London with her young child. So she has just given, not just given birth, but she has a young child and she's coming in and her husband is moving with her. There are signs that our industry is changing. And the other way that I see our industry changing too is that a lot of my young male, either my age or a little bit younger, are complaining about the lack of paternity leave that they have at their respective newspapers, television networks, and radio stations. So they also want the equality and the time to have that elusive work-life balance. You know, and so when you start to hear that, when you see that kind of movement happening, change is on the horizon, well, just by the very definition of the word, it's always going to be changing. And so you can be part of it, and you just have to continue to encourage it.
Great, thank you. We have time for one more question. I'm going to ask in the back here.
Yeah, I'm Rico. I'm journalism MA from Baptist University. We also have great privilege for coming to Baptist University a few days ago. And I just would like to echo of what Lulu has said. We're actually in MA Journalism Baptist University. I'm actually one of only 4 male students out of 70 of them are women. So I think it's good for women. So I would like to touch upon 2 issues here. I think the first thing, people really get misconception of women journalism when it comes to, so for instance, if they have TV or news programs, usually like politicians around the world, they prefer to have a woman because the conception is that the woman will not ask tough questions. But I think it's also a great misconception because nowadays women still ask very strong questions. And the second thing is that I would like to raise an issue of journalism safety, particularly for local journalists, region that I live in, Southeast Asia, be it in I don't know, Myanmar or Cambodia. I think for foreign correspondent, it's not a really tough jobs, but for local women journalists, I think we also have to raise these issues because it's very matter issues for them.
So you're asking?
Yeah, I would like to just ask the panel about these 2 comments that I have.
Okay. Who wants to take a shot at that?
I think that might be an Agnes question.
Okay.
Like me. So, sorry, what you want to know for local journalists if... well, I was talking to you yesterday. She's from Singapore. Fortunately, she's not part of her panel, but she's a Singaporean based in Singapore, and she was telling me about how difficult it was for her to work as a local in her own country. And I must say, I'm on the other side of it because as a French person going to foreign countries, I do benefit from the fact that I'm a foreigner. And I also benefit from the fact that I'm a woman because, as you say, sometimes out of a crowd of male journalists, they do pick me to ask the question because they think I'm going to be really nice. And this is when I hit them quite hard. So it can definitely be an asset, I think, to be a woman. And I would say don't try to be a man when you're a woman. Don't try to be like them. You have a different voice. You have a different way to tell the story. And I think it's very important to preserve that and not to try to just be someone will never be able to, to become anyway.
Great advice. Well, thank you all. This is all the time we have, but I hope we can continue this conversation because obviously these are the kinds of issues that that are key to what many of our news organizations are grappling with, and we as individuals. So find us. Let's keep talking today about this. And thank you all for coming. And thank the panelists.
Thank you, Jerry.